Hello, everybody from lovely, sunny Las Vegas. Um, Please let me know how my sound is, how my look is. I'm sitting in my hotel room at the MGM Grand, a few hundred feet away from MGM Grand Arena, where Rutgers was obliterated, destroyed, beat badly by Tennessee. The final score was 85-60. That's a bit kind for what transpired. Tennessee was up 26 at the half. They were up as much as 36 in the second half before calling off the Dogs. They dominated Rutgers in just about every facet. They hit 11 threes. They rounded half of their misses offensively. They got what they wanted in the paint. They created whatever they wanted offensively, and Rutgers did pretty much the exact opposite of that, and was completely outclassed. If last Friday's loss to Central Connecticut State confirmed fears entering the season of how this is going to be a lost season, how they're not going to be close to the NCAA tournament, a loss like this against Tennessee, a top 20 team, raises significant concerns about how bad this season could get results-wise. If you're losing by 26 points in Las Vegas against a Tennessee team, when you still have number one Purdue coming up, you still have number 7 Michigan, you still have some of these teams in the top end of the Big Ten, that's alarming. That's concerning. Um, and not that, again, we don't have to rehash the entire conversation about the contract and how it's still much more likely than not that Steve Pikiell will be back next year. But that conversation does take maybe a little bit of a different tone if this is the kind of result they get all throughout the year, if they get Eddie Jordan-esque results, because that was an Eddie Jordan-esque performance. Rutgers has not been immune to these kinds of games under Steve Pikiell. They had one last year against Purdue. They've had a couple of them against Illinois. They've had games where they were run out of the building, but none of them came after a 13-point home loss to Central Connecticut State, right? These things are compounding upon each other. And if you don't win against Notre Dame tomorrow, or at least put up somewhat of a fight, and you're staring down the barrel of a 7-game losing streak, which is their longest since 2018, and you're staring down the barrel of a really daunting Big Ten schedule where if you keep playing like this, I mean, I'm not sure where the wins are going to come because Rutgers was non-competitive. The center position, there was a bit of a shakeup from Steve Pikiell after the Central Connecticut State debacle. Javante Ware, the true freshman, he was the first center off the bench. Steve said that it was to get beef on the court against Tennessee's Trees. They're a really good rebounding team. That clearly didn't work given the results, but the logic is there, and the bigger thing is that Byfall did not play a minute today. He's had a really rough 5-game stretch against bad competition, and maybe Steve Pikiell didn't think this was the game for him. I got to be honest, I'm not sure what kind of games there are for him. And I think that was about the only notable difference. I mean, Steve Pikiell threw out 4 true freshmen on the court in the second half as well. He gave Harun Zerno more of a run, but it's hard to tell how much of these are intentional changes. Javante Ware, we know because it happened in the first half. How much of these changes are intentional, or how much of them are the result of Tennessee being up 26 and the game being over at halftime, and you kind of having some liberty to experiment because reality is that the game is over, right? So it's really hard to take something away from these games other than the fact that these things are not looking good. Got our first question here from Akiri5. How hot is Pike's seat right now? Again, in a situation where he didn't have an astronomical contract, probably hotter than it is now. But to your point, the follow from Akiri, how can you say you won the second half 30-29? That's embarrassing. You can't do a Joe Judge where you keep shooting yourself in the foot with things like that. I understand wanting to be positive. He is, after all, the one who branded us the Positivity Podcast, but there are limits to that, right? There's a reason you won 30-29. It's because, yes, your team played hard still, but the opponent was emptying the bench and the game was over. Those are not the kind of things that you're saying after a game. It's not exactly as bad, but it's in a similar vein to the GPA comment last year after the Michigan State loss at MSG. I know we kill coaches all the time for not saying anything in press conferences, but sometimes saying nothing is better than, going out of your way to say stuff like this. And he said it twice. He said it in his opening statement, which really stuck out to me. And then he said also in his opening statement that he learned a lot about his team. So I followed up and asked, what did you learn about your team? And he said they kept fighting and they won the second half 30-29. It's just a bad look. And the only saving grace is that they play again tomorrow, right? So this is not a result that's going to linger, assuming they put up somewhat of a fight against Notre Dame. But guys, throw in your questions. I know we're in the middle of a workday on Monday, so I appreciate all of you who are listening, and I am sure many of you turned the game off well before it was over. But we're here to kind of have an open conversation and let off some steam if you guys want to let off some steam. It's just, to me, again, there's no real point here of me going player by player and evaluating, because the reality is Rutgers was beat so badly and so outclassed and out talented and out muscled and out coached that there's nothing to talk about. There's really nothing to talk about this game other than the fact that Rutgers is not in the stratosphere as Tennessee, and um, that's not a good sign for the rest of the Big Ten. But what we can talk about, and I lost my train of thought, just like I lost my train of thought before I asked Steve a question at the press conference. Uh, the thing that struck me a lot. Sorry if my looks like my camera's getting stuck a little bit. Apologies for that. But the thing that stood out to me a lot is that I was here last year when Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey were the buzz of this place. Rutgers played two primetime games. They took Alabama and Texas A&M, ranked SEC teams, down to the wire, and they looked like they belonged on the same floor. And today, they did not look like they belonged on the same floor. They did not look like they belonged on the same stratosphere. I mean, went from a team that was like a major part of the tournament last year to being a filler team of an ever expanding tournament where you need teams to show up. Rutgers got in the spot because obviously of Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. It does help that Brandon Knight is close to Seth Berger, one of the co-founders of this tournament. They have some relationship, uh, and that helped. That's what Seth Berger told me last year. But the reality is that Rutgers is here because of Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, and without those two, they don't look like they belong. And that's not when you're. They're lucky, yes, that this game was at 1 o'clock Eastern on a Monday, on a workday, so that you pay attention, but it's just not good to have these kinds of results. Death Star 123 says, I've completely lost faith in Pike. I don't know. I don't think NIL can fix this. And again, NIL is part of the problem. It's not the entire problem. I agree. We talk about this a little bit in the podcast that Steve and I recorded this morning that should be out at the latest Tuesday morning. But there have been no signs in the past 24 months that if you gave Steve Pikiell a war chest the size of Kansas or of Kentucky or of any of these big programs, would he be able to field a team that is talented to compete with a team like Tennessee, and make the most of that team? Does he know what to look for? Does he know how to maximize that team, or does he know how to win one way? And it worked out the first time with Gio and Ron and Caleb and all those guys and Miles. That's kind of the central question here. And I think with each passing game, with each passing season, with 3 straight years of things going down the tubes, it's hard to not feel the way Death Star is right now. I empathize with that point of view. David Shinosky asks, how much NIL is Rutgers getting for playing in this tournament? Every team playing in this tournament gets $1 million. I don't know there are extra incentives. Last year, the top 4 teams split $1 million amongst themselves. 500 for the winner, 250 for the runner-up, 125 for the rest, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But this year, I'm not sure if it's exactly the same. Rutgers is not going to be in that pool anyway, so it doesn't really matter. The question is, will Rutgers, have a chance against Notre Dame tomorrow and earn a spot playing Wednesday and play on Thanksgiving in the consolation games? We shall see. Donnie Blue asks, Pikiell's days are numbered. No energy from the guys today. Steve Pikiell certainly got a lot of energy, was pulling out all the stops, arguing essentially every 50-50 call to the death with the refs, talking to his players. I agree that this wasn't, and again, we talked about this on the podcast with Steve. This isn't the kind of team that in the early Steve Pikiell era, they were not as talented. They were probably roughly as talented as this team, but they played so hard. They played one of the hardest playing teams in the country, and that doesn't erase the talent gap, but it does, fill in some of the gaps. And this team just didn't play to that level. The last 2 or 3 teams don't play to that level. But the effort, the energy is not the reason this team got completely manhandled by Tennessee. Tennessee's just significantly better, more talented, more veteran, just better, right? On the point of Pikiell's days being numbered, I mean, if things keep going in this direction, I certainly you're running out of time to turn things around. And the more and more, the only reason you are sticking around is because of a giant contract you got from the AD's predecessor. The more you're running out of other reasons to earned the spot as the head coach, then yes, I would agree um, that these are hitting his resume and hurting his chances to stick around long term. It does feel like we are trending in the direction of when, not if. Um, there is certainly a chance for things to turn around, but the signs of that happening are significantly lowering with each time this team plays. Uh, the chances are running out. I still think Steve Pikiell gets another offseason with more support from the administration. He gets that mulligan, but it's looking more and more like that's going to be the last chance. And actually, I would say at this point, it probably will be the last chance if it gets to that point. And um, you could buy yourself some equity here if you somehow overperform expectations from this really bad start to the year. But all the equity he built up in his first 5 years are gone. They were gone after last year, completely gone. He's losing more and more people with every result, and he's got a lot of work to do to rebuild that equity that he had at one point, which is crazy to think about where things were so recently and where they are now. Steve Play says, "What are you having for dinner tonight? And is it crab steak?" Well, hopefully my boss is not listening and he's not wondering what I'm having for dinner. And if crab steak is hopefully not too expensive, and hopefully I win enough on the craps table to afford whatever dinner I want. Uh, we shall see. Thank you for commenting, Steve Politi 5743. Sounds like a guy I know. Any other questions, guys? We're 11 minutes in. I don't want to ramble on too long. I guess you guys can tell me what do you think about that. In the second half, we won 30-29 comments. As soon as it caught my ear, I thought it would catch a little bit of attention, which is not a great thing to be saying after a blowout like that. Let me check the Discord to see if there's any questions there. Um, let's see. Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. Let me see. Sorry for slowing down, fellas. So a couple of questions um, that are in a similar vein of what we just talked about. But so at what point do RU90 asks on our Discord? So at what point do the serious discussions start about replacing Pike? Couldn't break 500 with 2 lottery picks last year, and despite international signings, couldn't recruit D1 players for this year. When, affordability aside, an infinite MPG as given the buyout factor and assuming Pikiell stays, what will it take to get him to get an outside voice in to help fix offense, recruiting, scouting, literally everything? Well, the outside voice thing is something we've preached often here. Again, Steve Pikiell has not fired an assistant coach since he's been here. He has not, despite the disaster last year was, kept his entire coaching staff intact and was pretty emphatic that, minutes after the season was over, he said that was one of his big goals of the offseason, which is never a good sign. What will it take? It will take the administration forcing his hand, essentially, right? He's not going to do it himself. He's shown that, especially when he had an AD that kind of gave him carte blanche. It's going to be up to Kelly Zinn. And that might be, listen, I'm just spitballing here. That might be an ultimatum. If, you get one more year, you have to get one more year because of your contract, but you got to change something. We'll give you the support, but you have to change something. You have to bring an outside voice in. Coquise Washington did that somewhat, not forced by Kelly Zinn because it happened before she was hired, but she brought in Shannon LaBeouf from UCLA, a very highly touted assistant coach. And I mean, listen, it hasn't exactly resulted yet, but the blueprint is there at Rutgers. And to go back to RU90's question, sorry, at what point serious discussions about replacing Pikiell? Again, the thing is, you can't say affordability aside because, I mean, that's the whole bit here. Right? Rutgers does not have the money to fire a coach that you would owe $20 million, especially because he's not the kind of, it's not like James Franklin where Penn State fired him, owed him $60 million or whatever, but he got a head coaching job within 2 months or a month, right? And he offset some of that money. I mean, who's going to hire Steve Pikiell after what happened here at Rutgers? Certainly not a team that is going to pay him enough money to offset the money he's owed in any significant amount, right? So the money is the whole thing. It would have to get bad enough. Like this game today happening, multiple times this season. Like the Big Ten schedule is 20 games. It happening 5 to 6 times in the Big Ten. Like it has to be Eddie Jordan bad, where it's untenable, where keeping him would be worse than it would cost Rutgers more money in tickets and attention and all that stuff than it would to fire him, right? That is the point. And that's a high threshold to hit. Again, this is Rutgers athletics, guys. This is Rutgers athletics. You have to understand that. You have to understand the lack of resources this program, this athletic department has historically had. I mean, to contemplate firing a coach that you would owe $20 million and his assistant coach that you would owe $1.5 million. That's a lot of money, especially in an era today where you need twice that money to pay for a roster. I know I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but that's where things stand. Though I think it is fair to ask that question after every game like this because they keep hitting a new low. Akiri asks, why the heck is Politi not there with you? We don't really travel with two guys anymore, really. Just kind of doesn't really make that much sense. We traveled with three guys last year because it was Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. It was supposed to be the year. We had a contest entry, so that kind of played a part in it. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of questioning why I'm here, right? I mean, it's going to be 2 long days. Uh, certainly, today was a long day for Rutgers. Uh, Snowflake says tone deaf statement. Can't imagine the AD loving the we won the second half statement. I gotta say, it's catching some buzz. People are not happy about it, and it's not a good look. I agree, it's not a good look. Kellyson is not here. Her deputy chief of staff Matt Colagiovanni is here. He was in the press conference. Didn't get a chance to catch him after. I imagine it's not something that sounds particularly good. Tom says our offense is set up for players with superior scoring talent. We have zero players with superior offensive talent, ridiculous offensive sets. I agree. First, I will say I'm not quite sure what offensive sets you're talking about because I just see no repeatable actions. I'm sure there are things they coach and things they run, but I just don't see it. I mean, Brandon Gaudin said on the broadcast that it's like watching a root canal. It's like getting a root canal, and that's the truth. I mean, it's hard to watch. And to your point, last year this offense looked good because it had Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, who are guys who look good in any offense because they can hit shots, they can get to the rim, they can create for themselves. This offense is predicated on guys creating for themselves, guys beating their man off the dribble. And you had that with Geo Baker, you had that with Ron Harper, you had that with Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. You don't have that now. And that when as I highlighted this in my story, like last year, you always had the best guy on the floor for the most part with Dylan Harper, right? And that gave you a chance. This past 3-day stretch would not happen with Dylan Harper. They would not lose to Central Connecticut State and Ace Bailey. They would not lose to Central Connecticut State, and they would not lose by, be down 36 points to Tennessee, right? I think this season is going to vindicate Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey significantly for people who think they were at all part of the problem last year. They were the only reason it didn't get any worse. RU Hoops Project says it's a moral lock that we will at least have these types of blowouts 5 times this season. I think you play Purdue twice, you play Michigan. Or do you play Purdue twice? Sorry, I don't mean to. I should check that before I say that. No, you play Purdue once at home. You play Michigan. You play Indiana, which is good. You play Illinois, which is always good for a blowout win of Rutgers. Yeah, I could see it happening multiple more times. I don't know about 5. That is the line where it's like, Eddie Jordan bad, but yeah, based on today, I would not. I'm not entirely inclined to disagree with you, RU Hoops Project. We simply don't have the players to compete right now, and that ultimately comes down to recruiting. You could bring in John Wooden or Krzyzewski, and it still wouldn't change the results this season. Yes, I agree. I agree. But that comes back to the coach, right? Like Krzyzewski and John Wooden had a lot of good players. One, because of their legendary coaches. Two, they probably, it's not like John Wooden and Mike Krzyzewski were saints that never crossed the line of the rules to get these elite players. But yes, they were great coaches because they had great players, and they got great players. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yes, a lot of the issues are because the players are not that great. But let's also acknowledge that this coaching staff is not getting the most out of these players so far. I mean, it's pretty hard to argue against that point after what we watched the last 3 days. Is multi-year NIL contracts ever going to be a thing? Then players can develop in the program. It seems that required for the D to be connected. I mean, maybe, but you'd be a fool if you're a player to sign a multi-year NIL contract if you don't have to. Like if it's not obligated by the NCAA. And I don't know if the NCAA can obligate those kinds of things unless there's a collective bargaining agreement between the players and the schools. And I just don't see that happening. I mean, college sports is not professional sports where there's like one league and one entity, and the players stay there for decades, and it's a very transient sport. Guys are by definition there for 4 years, 5 years max. And sorry, I got a text. I got a little distracted there. Yeah, so it's hard to get something like that going. I think I can understand why fans and coaches would want that. I just don't see it being feasible. I really don't. I mean, no one in college sports can agree on anything. That feels like something that players would be foolish to do that. Kellyson is Kellyson there? No, she's not there. I knew she wouldn't be here. I asked last week, and I was told she would not be here. Should we read anything into her not being there and having a delegate instead? No. Pat Hobbs wasn't here. Well, actually, Ryan Passari wasn't here last year. I don't think. No, I just don't think. I don't think it's abnormal. It's a big week football wise. Obviously, it's Thanksgiving. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't look too much into that. You should use the money saved for Polity not going with you to get some fancy steak. Listen, I'm not disagreeing with you, Mike McCurr. Maybe McMurr. Maybe I will do that. And if someone complains about my expense report, I will say that I got a meal for me and Polity. All right, I've been going for 20 minutes. I got to hop off soon to do an interview on an unrelated story. Anybody else have anything else to say? Our Hoops project, we have no offense, but at least we have defense. Oh, yeah, we gave up 56 and one half. Yeah, the defense has been, the offense is an issue, yes, but the defense has been the story, right? Like this was supposed to be a team that gets back to its roots, plays really hard defensively, and so far they don't create turnovers. They can't protect the rim. They certainly cannot protect the perimeter. They can't stay in front of their men. They sometimes, every so often, not as often not as bad as it could be, but oftentimes they lose their man or get lost in a set play from the opponent. So, I mean, that's the most alarming thing, right? Because let's be real, the offense was never really going to be good, but you'd think that this team was going to be anchored by its defense, and we have not seen that so far. Do you think Pikiell could coach this Tennessee team successfully? Yeah, because I think this Tennessee team is built a lot like what Steve Pikiell, in an ideal world last year, was this Tennessee team, where you have an elite 5-star freshman in Nate Amont. You have a point guard. Jacoby Gillespie isn't Dylan Harper as far as his experience, right? He's a senior, and they're not exactly the same game, but they're a scoring guard who could put points up on the board like crazy. You have long wing defenders, like a lot of guys that can rebound, protect the perimeter, move really well. And you have trees at center. Felix Okpara is a beast, right? Like he's a guy that Rutgers attempted to get in the portal before Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, and obviously never really had a chance. But that's the kind of guy that transforms your team defensively, and it would be a great compliment to those two guys. Do I think Pikiell could coach them successfully? Let's say this: if they flipped the coaches, Steve Pikiell coached Tennessee, and Rutgers was coached by Rick Barnes, Tennessee would win. Obviously, I don't know if they'd win by 26. I don't know if they'd get up by 36, but they would win because they're just that much better. Go to the casino and put all your money on red. I always put my money on black. So we had 48 shots. So maybe we'll do that later. And then if you're going to tell me to donate that winning to NIL, think again. I'm donating that to the Brian Fonseca Fund. Pike's seat is going to get hot once we start Big Ten play. Pike's seat is warm, right? Again, on paper, it's warm, but what is cooling it is the enormous contract, right? Again, I already went through that spiel at the beginning. Let's not do it again. If we get smoked by Purdue, he's in trouble. No, I think the issue would be if they get smoked by Minnesota or Penn State or a team that's bad, right? It's not shocked. I mean, they lost by 31 to Purdue last year. They lost. They're one of his arguably his best team, 21-22, lost to Illinois by 36 or something. It's not that you lose to these teams this way. It's that one, they happen a lot. Like every time you play a team like this happens. Like this has to be an isolated incident or close to it, because you can't lose like this every time you play Purdue or Michigan or a team of that caliber. But the other part would be losing a game like this to a Penn State or a Minnesota or an Iowa or a team that, Indiana, a team that's not quite top 10, top 20. Also, it's Purdue, Purdue. Anything else? I'm at 23 minutes. I'm going to head out soon. Let me check. And thank you guys for tuning in during a work day. And after pretty bad loss. Seton Hall's beating NC State by 13, apparently. I think Seton Hall is much better this year, and I think that is a game to watch at Seton Hall. That's a game you have to compete in. And Seton Hall is not quite Penn State bad, but if you lose that game the way you lost today, then that's really when alarm bells are already ringing, but you understand my point. They get even louder. That's a game. I think Seton Hall will be favored. I think Seton Hall will, as of today, will probably win by a decent amount, but Rutgers, if they lose that game, cannot lose that game by a wide margin. All right, guys, let me head out. Let me go write a story about the 30 to 29 comments. I was going to write that, but I wanted to get in front of you guys first so that we can talk it through. Thanks for listening. Thanks for participating. Please, again, I know I do this every time, but like the episode, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, share it if you want with your friends. Thanks again. I appreciate it. We'll be back again tomorrow around this time after Rutgers plays Notre Dame. We'll see if it'll be a more cheery episode. Until then, thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.